Hello, this is RV Vagabond Jerry, and today I'm going to explain to you why RV manufacturers, particularly in 50 amp motorhomes, will wire some of the 120 volt electrical outlets through the inverter and some will not. And the ones that are not wired through the inverter will work only when you're plugged into shore power. And I've learned about this before I bought my motorhome, and a lot of people were complaining that when they're not plugged into shore power, some of their electric outlets wouldn't work, and I didn't like that. So I told my dealer to rewire all of my 120 volt electrical outlets through the inverter, all of them, and they did it. And apparently that's not a big job because they didn't charge me much to do it. So I did accomplish my goal of having the 120 electrical outlets always working whether I'm plugged in the shore power or not. However, I'm going to explain to you why that may not have been the smartest thing to do. And I recently found this out when an incident happened to me. I was plugged in the 50 amp shore power, and it was really cold. I had two space heaters running at the same time, plugged into these 120 outlets. And then I started cooking. And when I turned on my microwave oven, then bam, all my power goes out. So first I checked my 120 AC breakers, and all of them were up. None of the breakers had trips. So then I turned on my generator, but still nothing. So I thought, where do I go from here? I don't know what else to check. So I called the emergency road service company that I use, talked to them on the phone, and they could not pinpoint the problem. I called the manager of the RV park. He didn't know. So my only solution then was to just pack up the motorhome and drive it to an RV repair shop and have them look at it and see if they can figure out why my power has gone out. So the first thing the RV guy did was check those breakers and saw that they were all okay. So then he checked the transfer switch, which is this box here, but there is no breaker on it. There's really nothing to check unless the whole doggone thing is just blown out. So then he says, let's check the inverter box, which is in this compartment. That's the inverter right there, and there is a 30 amp breaker right there. So this had popped out. That was the problem. The breaker blew on the inverter. So after just punching that breaker button in, now everything works. So the bottom line is, the reason why they wire some of the electrical outlets to the inverter and some not is so that if you are using all 30 amps of outlets through your inverter, then the other outlets that are not wired through the inverter will still work when you're plugged into shore power or running the generator. So that answers the question, why are some of the outlets run through the inverter and some are not? So this way, if you have only some of the outlets through the inverter, the other ones will always work to the shore power, and that way you can use all the power you want, because what runs through the inverter always runs through the inverter, whether you're plugged in the shore power or not. Now that brings up an interesting point. Why, when I have a 50 amp motorhome, is my inverter only a 30 amp inverter? Well, they do make larger inverters that are 50 amp inverters, where that would essentially never happen. But I think the reason why this is a 50 amp motorhome and they only put a 30 amp inverter is because the larger inverters cost more money. And the RV manufacturers want to keep their manufacturing costs down. So rather than spending a few extra bucks for a larger inverter, they get the cheaper 30 amp inverter and then do this thing where only some of the outlets are wired through the inverter and some are not. Now you can upgrade your inverter to a larger inverter, and then that would be the best. So in my situation, I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't have had my dealer run all the outlets through the inverter for this particular type of situation. Although my first choice would have been for the motorhome to have an option of having a 30 amp inverter or a 50 amp inverter. Well, they don't give you that option. They only put the 30 amp inverters on new coaches. Although if you're getting one of these really expensive high-end coaches, then you should get a 50 amp inverter for the manufacturer, I think. So, if you ever plugged in the 50 amp and you have all your power blown and you see that you're using a lot of power, now you will know what to check to resolve the issue, and you won't almost panic like I did, having checked the breakers and not knowing where to go and having to call people to find somebody to help me. So if that happens to you, then just watch this video again and it'll tell you what to do, which the net result was the breaker tripped on the inverter. That was it. So that's where you want to go. So folks, I hope this has helped you. Good day.